Hello, welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Brian Michael.
And I'm Angela Yeager. You saw a clip at the top of the show for our first movie this week, which is Wonder Woman. And in this movie, Wonder Woman leaves her island paradise to follow a World War I pilot to help stop the war here on Earth. And the film, of course, is directed by Patty Jenkins, whose previous effort was Monster. That's probably one of her best known movies. Quite a big difference from this one. So everyone knows who watches the show that I'm not a big superhero movie fan. Not to say that I've never liked a superhero movie. Mm-hmm. I think you could probably count on one-ish hands, maybe two.
Maybe two.
Two.
There might be like six. Yeah, there might be six.
Do you go back to like the Tim Burton Batman movies, and you could probably get to two hands.
On the show, so.
I know, but you could probably count those. So I do have a high standard for superhero movies, so it's true.
Not like the Tim Burton ones, but okay, go ahead.
I like the first two. And then after that, anyway, that wrong movie. So, as I was saying, I have a high standard, it's true, but I actually tried to go in with fairly low expectations for this one, just because I haven't been a very big fan of many of the Marvel or DC movies lately, with the exception of Logan, and so I didn't go in with super high expectations, but I was expecting a movie that was a little bit more progressive or feminist than the 1970s Wonder Woman, and I don't know, because it's 2017.
Why? She was created in the 40s, why couldn't she go back to the 40s? I always love the expectation, because she's the first, she's the female one, so now because the gods were so just.
No, I just thought, honestly, I almost at about an hour in, I was at sort of the 3-star mark. I really enjoyed the first half of the movie. I enjoyed the time that she spent on the island. I wanted more Robin Wright. I didn't get enough of her. We
always want more Robin Wright.
I know, it's true, but she's in it not long enough at all.
Yeah.
I liked the way they set up her land where she came in, and I didn't even mind the way it set up the relationship with Chris Pine. The problem is, when she gets to Earth in World War I, her sort of, her agency is taken away from her. She's sort of this person who's kind of clueless, doesn't know what's going on, even though she's supposedly a god and well-read. Chris Pine has to kind of lead her around everywhere. And there's way too much of him in the movie for the love interest. At one point I thought, well, who's actually the star of this movie? Is it Chris Pine or is it Gal Gadot, or however you say her name?
That's the kind of interesting. That is one of the things I did think about, because his name is, should be above the title. He is the bigger star. He is Captain Kirk, but it is obviously her movie. I really like Chris Pine in this movie. He still has a little swagger from Hell or High Water that I really enjoy. They have a nice play back and forth. The movie I compare this to would be Thor, and I'm one of the few people who actually liked Thor, and I like the fish out of water where, it's this god who comes to town and, just doesn't know how to conform with everyone else. Though she's done some reading on certain things, but not readings on everything else, and knows all of the languages, but doesn't know anything about the culture. Fine.
Yeah.
What I really didn't want was another origin story. Oh my God, please, can't we do this in a quick flashback? I mean, I know it's her first movie, but I know how she got there. Most people know how she got there. We didn't need to do that. The thing so we had that in the first half, which was pretty. The island was very nice, and I like some of those things there. But then the second half, it takes a while. We're like, okay, so now we're going to have action? Nope. Oh, here come the Germans, the whole bunch of them, like 30 of them, wipe out a ton of Amazons, which, okay, they're supposed to be tougher than everyone else. Sure, fine. And then we travel to London. Okay, we're going to fight now? Nope. Then we're going to travel some more. And it's like, oh, when is the action going to take place? Sadly, when the action does take place, the DC universe and Zack Snyder's influence is felt. Everything starts to go in slow motion, and then it's really dark. It looks gross, which I know it's during World War I, but it's just such an ugly picture and such cheap looking special effect, and it's in slow motion. And I got so tired of it that at the end, when there's a big huge battle and it comes to the big huge punch that she's going to do to the big bad guy, and went in slow motion, I actually said out loud, and I apologized to people in the theater, I said, just hit him already! Because I just got tired of the slow come on, just do it. And it wouldn't be so bad if it didn't look bad. When she crashes through the one wall and the window, it looks terrible. It's in the trailer. It looks awful.
Yeah, it's bad CG. Yeah, you know what's funny? It's almost like you mentioned. It's sort of like Thor. It reminded me a little bit of the Captain America movies where he's the fish out of water.
And I didn't like the first
too.
Captain America. Captain America,
And it reminds me a little bit of that actually as well in terms of that fish out of the water aspect. But unlike in Captain America, where you don't see a woman leading him around everywhere and telling him the ways of the world and taking all of the scenes away from him, like that happens in Wonder Woman. The other thing in the action, you know how I always complained in Captain America it was too fast, like all the quick cutting, so all you saw was this, you know, constantly. This is like the opposite of that. Like you said, the slow-mo, how many times did she do that move where she kind of twirls her legs around?
And, you know, but then when she starts the move, though, it's something is in the way. And then all of a sudden she starts the move again, and it was just like.
And then they slow it down, and then they kind of do this 180 around her.
I'm not
It's
impressed.
okay one time, but if you use the same action sequence over and over,
Yeah.
I didn't bother me as much as you did that it took a while to get to the action. If there had been more interesting characters to develop along the way, but I didn't find the rogue of Mary.
Okay, so let's talk about those guys. So they got the Native American who and I'm like, okay,
who's in
sure.
World War I.
Well, no, that's not uncommon. And he turns and goes, well, my people were taken, the land was taken by his people, and he's sleeping. Never touching that again. Because I went, ooh, how interesting. Nope, never talk about that again.
Just a throwaway
then
line.
there's the guy who's, the Frenchman or Middle East. He speaks French, excuse me. And of course, he's the womanizer.
I think he's Moroccan,
and he says things, to her. And then there's the guy who just likes to fight, but he can't fight whatsoever. They're they're so paper thin. There's nothing about these guys that we want to see.
It's like, why are they even
go back in there? And before people write emails, I understand that first Captain America, he actually wasn't here in present day, or that came a little bit later. But still, we get the point there. Yeah, and so that everyone else is just paper thin. I really love the look of the villain of Dr. Poison with the mask. I thought that was awesome. Nothing happens with her. And that was disappointing. And of course, then she has to fight the big.
David Thewlis, who's a great actor, is in this movie. And there's a big action. So there's two major action sequences happening at the same time at the end of this movie. One is with Chris Pine, because we wouldn't want to emasculate him apparently.
I really liked what he did.
But you're almost like, okay, but you're rooting for him sort of at the end, because her action sequence against the god is sort of boring, and it's just a bunch of bad CG. So again, this is my point. I know people really want to be excited for this movie because it's one of the first big budget, female superhero movies that's got any sort of marketing weight behind it. But I don't think this is going to stand the test of time. And as much as I want to love it as a feminist, I just can't.
When you want to have an action sequence in a World War I movie, it doesn't say that it has to be all bright sunshine and Snow White. But when you have your big special effects are at night, unless it's Lord of the Rings, because that was way back in the day and we were still working things out. But now, when your big sequences are at night, it's because you're hiding things. It's not because it's spectacular. It looks like crap. The end of Batman v Superman looked like crap, and so does this one. And I was so bummed out by that, because yes, I was hoping for a Wonder Woman. I really was. And now there's all this weird talk, if you don't like it, you're not a feminist or whatever. Bad movies.
Well, I am, and I didn't like it, so I don't know what to say. And you can't take that away from me.
Because it just was.
I'm giving it 2
so
stars.
Bummed.
And I hate to bring up, and you're going to be shocked that I'm bringing up, but Ghost in the Shell, which I saw at our second run theater here in town. Which is not a great movie, but actually Scarlett Johansson in the movie has some good action sequences.
Yeah.
And it made me think, like, with a cool look. And it actually has, the best thing about that movie is it actually has a really cool look about it. And it's just like, let's get a little original with the look of some of these films. Just because it has a lot of special effects doesn't mean it has to look like everything else. So anyway.
That's too bad.
So we'll move on to our next movie. This is A Quiet Passion. And this is the biopic of American poet Emily Dickinson, which I know probably half of you have already started falling asleep just from those words. She is now considered one of the most important poets from the 19th century, up there with Walt Whitman. But in her day, she went pretty much unrecognized and spent most of her life as a recluse. The film is directed by the great Terence Davies, interestingly enough, one of the great English directors, but has had actually a couple of movies now. House of Mirth was another one about Edith Wharton, which was a period piece, but an American one where he's had a lot of success. He also did The Long Day Closes and Deep Blue Sea. This is a movie with a powerhouse performance by Cynthia Nixon, who, in my opinion, for this week's show, is the real Wonder Woman.
Wow.
This is her in every shot of the movie. And if she doesn't get, and it's so early in the year that I'm afraid it's going to get lost in the shuffle, but this is the kind of movie, this is the kind of performance that should be winning Best actress, or be nominated at the very least for Best Actress, because you don't get much more complex and full body of a performance than this. Cynthia Nixon owns this performance, and if those of you have only ever seen her as Miranda in Sex and the City, you really need to go see her in this movie because she's amazing. She portrays Dickinson as this very kind of just spiritually fraught, introspective, caring and intellectual, but also just really tormented person. And I just found the portrayal fascinating. I couldn't take my eyes off her, honestly.
You know, it's the tale of two tales here, because the first half works really well. And I enjoyed the first half so much that it kind of overshadowed the second half. The first half was very funny and very sharp and very quick. And then the second half, and I understand why the second half has to be the way it is. It's very dramatic and very dark, so to speak, and you really get to see her struggle with faith and her perception of other people and what they're doing with their lives and stuff. And it kind of drags a little bit there for me. And I like the movie. I'd give it 3 stars. She is amazing in it, and she is absolutely fantastic in this film. You cannot take your eyes off her for just a second. And yes, I do know her just from Sex and the City. I've always heard, the myth about her out on Broadway doing 2 different shows, and one's in the morning and one's in the evening, and just being able to be just an accomplished actress. And this really shows what she can do. And I mean, wow, you can't take your eyes off of her. She's absolutely incredible. And when she gets in her character, as you would perceive, Emily Dixon did, she gets very, very bitter and very controlling. Right. Just by being in her room, and you can just feel the people around her. You can just feel that tension. You can just feel how kind of ugly that really gets. They do a great job of integrating the poetry in there, which is kind of tough to do.
It's hard to do a movie about
really
poets.
Hard
That's
to do.
why there hasn't been.
I'm always like, can you just show it on the side? A great film like Frida, which I absolutely love, and if you love, a great biopics about artists, Frida is always the high standard, the gold standard, really. But it did a really good job of interjecting and showing. Of course, it was a visual art that they could show in with what she was doing.
It's easier with visual.
You could do that somewhat with poetry, I think, a little bit in there to show that.
I think he did a good job showing the poetry in terms of, she's doing it in voiceover, but it's often poems that are actually related, because she was such an introspective poet. A lot of her poetry was related
visual,
to her
so
life.
I got to see it. If I can read along with
well,
it, then it helps
I
a little
liked
bit with
it, and
me
I think
because of my
Cynthia
own
Dixon.
shortcomings.
I'm surprised you're only giving it 3 stars. This is actually a 4-star film for me.
Ooh, look at you.
I loved it. I didn't feel like the second half dragged. I thought it's tragic, obviously, but I just kept thinking, it is pretty tough to do a movie about a poet, period, much less a poet who was a recluse who almost never left her room.
Yeah.
I thought, how are you going to film this? And he manages to make it. And a lot of this is Cynthia Nixon's performance. I was just captivated the entire time. So
when her illness kicks in, boy, that was.
And all the supporting actors are really, really good, including Carradine. Oh gosh, first name Carradine. Keith Carradine is her father. But it's really the Cynthia Nixon show. So great to see her on the big screen.
Oh, so now we're going to change gears into our DVD pick of the week, which is My Little Chickadee, which stars Mae West as a Flower Belle, who's thrown out of town for an explicit affair that she's having. And on the train ride out, she meets a con man played by W.C. Fields. Now, this is a really big deal back in the day when these two had come together, because they were both big movie stars, and maybe they're a little bit on the decline of their careers, but they were both very racy. They were both very, very funny. And so to bring them both together, how does that not possibly work? And they even had the director who worked a lot with W.C. Fields, which was Edward Cline, who did The Baked Dick and a lot of other his best films. And what happens is, I love both of their individual work a lot more than I did this film together. There's a lot of great gags, but it feels a little pieced together, kind of like some of the things were kind of improvised necessarily, or just maybe poorly edited. I don't know necessarily what happens, but it feels a little pieced together that they've kind of done here.
I think it actually was. So one thing, I read up a little bit on this movie because I was just curious about, you mentioned that they didn't like each other, and I was curious about the history. The film was heavily edited and censored by the studio. So the original version, which Mae West actually wrote the screenplay, she actually wrote it entirely herself. It's co-credited to W.C. Fields, which is one of the reasons she never talked to him again. He wrote, he kind of improvised one scene at the bar, and you'll know which scene I'm talking about. There's an extended scene at the bar that he kind of wrote or improvised. And because of that, and the studio wanted to play to him because he's the man, and they wanted to give him, make him happy, they gave him co-screenwriting credit. So it looked like they both did equal sequel, but she actually wrote the whole screenplay. But apparently the studio heavily edited it, so the version we have today is not what, because of the censors. Yeah.
Well, see, with these two, though, I think that, and it's the same with, you couldn't put Bob Hope with with one of the Marx Brothers. You have to have a straight man. And that's probably the problem when they're together. Of course, he'll hit on her and say something, and then she, fires back at him. And it's just like, oh, okay. And it's a different rhythm when both are doing jokes. You can't do that. One has to be the setup, and one has to be kind of the payoff.
Well, they have
especially
the one
the way
guy,
they've always done
the guy at the bar who's sort of supposed to be the straight man.
But whenever they're together, it doesn't kind of work that way, a little bit.
And they're not actually in that many scenes together. No, it's funny. It's supposed to be kind of a spoof, of course, of westerns, and I think it works pretty well. I liked it. I didn't love it. It has enough really good laughs, and I'm a fan of Mae West. You talk about, we almost, if it wasn't for your movie, we could have had a whole female empowerment episode here from start to finish.
Diggity.
But yours kind of ruined our streak, because I think our next one, which is a western, is not very female empowerment. But this was the last hit of Mae West's career. This actually was a big hit despite getting bad critical reviews. Most of the reviewers credited W.C. Fields for the movie being good, not her, which really made her mad, and that's why she said she'd never speak to him again.
He does win out. I think he's a little funnier than she is.
Well, she's quite good in some of the scenes,
I think probably the stuff they edited out mostly was her racy stuff, especially if she wrote it, because her stuff was really racy.
Well, she was unfortunately one of the actresses that had a hard time after the censorship code came in 34. She had a hard time getting roles because she really liked to take stuff up a notch. So.
This is a good jumping off point, though. If you're not familiar with a lot of their works, I would, really recommend going in and looking at it. I had the Glamour collection. I think it was Mae West with this one on there with 5 movies on it, and the 4 others are fantastic. Certainly ones with she with Cary Grant as well.
Definitely, she's fun to check out.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that W.C. Fields I think is really funny because he's always working with children or animals, which you're not supposed to do, and he is one of the few people who can do it, and he does it really, really well. And I do love the little one-liners. I do love the little punchy things, and it's very un-PC, but it's a lot of fun, and I do enjoy them, and they are definitely worth looking into. Did I mention there was an animated film about Wonder Woman that you should check out from 2009? I forgot to mention that earlier. That's a much better film. All right, so we're going to go on to his distinguished classics. The next film is a feminist film, Man of the West.
It even has man in the title.
It's a Western. It's an Anthony Mann Western. That's all I got to say, really. That's my only need to review this film. It's not black and white, though. It is a color film. This actually stars a reformed outlaw played by Gary Cooper, who becomes stranded after a train robbery and must join his old gang of outlaws in order to survive. Now, along the way, he has a singer who's also on the train, as well as a con man, and those two are kind of his sidekicks to this. And this is an absolutely fantastic film, and aside from her not getting enough screen time or being a strong enough character, I think this is a perfect movie. Actually, Julie London, who was a childhood, I saw her in Emergency. She was the nurse in that show. She's absolutely fantastic. You have Lee Cobb, who comes in and just destroys just about every scene he's in. He's the gang leader.
Yeah,
and he's
Lee Cobb is
absolutely
great. Yeah, he's great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
The villains are menacing, and they enjoy being menacing, and there's lots of close-ups of them just being evil and doing wrong. And there's Gary Cooper, who's just always very stoic. It's an absolutely fantastic film. It follows along with the same with the Anthony Mann, where there's some struggle with family and within, because these outlaws are actually his uncle and his cousins, even though he's older than everyone else. But that's fine. And I just absolutely love this film. There were so many twists and turns that, I kind of knew how things were going to end, but how it got there really surprised me. There's a great shootout, which you would totally expect. There's a great ending. Everything. And some shocks along the ending as well.
Yeah, I kind of wondered watching this. When I started watching it, I was thinking of Tarantino's most recent film.
Yep. Yeah, I have that written
which
down.
I'm forgetting the name of suddenly.
Django.
No, not Django.
Hateful Eight.
Hateful Eight.
Yes.
Because this movie has a very kind of the premise. They all end up in this little house together. The good and the bad. And in this case, we know who to trust and who not to trust because we know it's Gary Cooper, and
Always.
But so a little different than Hateful Eight, but very similar setup. It's very claustrophobic. They're all together in this house. They can't get out. And he's kind of scheming. He's kind of trying to play both sides the whole movie. So I really like that. I do miss, I like Gary Cooper's not one of my favorites in westerns. I like him better in the aw shucks comedies and stuff. And
High Noon's pretty good though.
Well,
You
yeah,
gotta remember
but
that. I know, I felt the same way, but I was like, no, wait. Yeah, yeah.
But compared to Jimmy Stewart, who brings like kind of like that just like anxious paranoia to the Anthony Mann thing, I almost
The
kind of
edge.
wished he had been in this movie
Yeah.
instead. But you know, it's still a great film, and it's definitely not the type of Western you feel like you've seen before over and
Yeah.
over. This isn't the usual shoot 'em up, you know, cowboys and Indians type of Western. It's more like a lot of Anthony Mann's movies. It's really a psychological drama with a Western, you know, covering,
Yes.
background, which is what makes his movies stand the test of time. And unfortunately, at the time they came out, unlike Ford or some of his,
Yep.
they were all bombs, you know. So he's one of these people that's just appreciated now for being the great genius that he is. So
I do want
definitely
to
a great
prove that I
film.
do have Tarantino written there, and I also have Unforgiven. So if you're a Tarantino fan or a fan of Unforgiven, which is kind of a nice companion piece when you really think about it, because here's a man who's reformed his
feature.
ways. He's on his way on the train ride in order to actually to hire a school teacher for the township that he now lives in because he has a new life, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And you know, to touch back on Jimmy Stewart, Stewart was supposed to be in the film, but him and Mann
really?
had a falling out.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so he didn't get the part. But and I think Gary Cooper did a great job. There's just one little scene where he explains to her, it's a sickness inside me. I want to kill them. I want to kill them all. But I've tried to, you know, that's not something that's not who I am anymore. And he does a fine job of it. But all I kept thinking was Jimmy Stewart would have tore into that scene because he has those crazy eyes. If you watch the show, you know I think Jimmy Stewart just was one notch away from just an axe murderer sometime in those movies.
Well,
and
especially in those Anthony Mann ones, he really plays a
Yes.
guy like he's about
On
to
the
crack
edge.
any minute. Yeah.
Always, but it's an absolutely fantastic film, Man of the West. You got to find it. It's available out there on disc. You can rent it online and just find it. Just buy it.
Just buy it.
Just buy it. You can't go wrong with it.
So our next segment is Her Fresh Picks, and this is where we review critically acclaimed movies that have come out this year that we didn't get a chance to see when they first came out to theaters, or in many of the cases, they did not come out to Salem, Oregon at all. And and this one is called The Girl with All the Gifts. And I thank Brian for bringing this one to my attention because he saw it first and then was raving about it to me and said, you have to see this. And he said 2 keywords, zombies and British film. And I said, okay, I'll watch that. And this is about survivors in a dystopian future who are protecting a young girl who holds the key to their future. And I don't want to give too much away about this film. I already said it was a zombie movie, so you know that. But it's not your Night of the Living Dead type zombie movie. If I was to say it's like anything, maybe... gosh, I'm trying to think. You know, it actually reminded me pretty much a little bit more of a sci-fi movie. Gosh, which one am I thinking of? With Clive Owen and Julianne Moore. Children of Men, a little bit, you know, where they're protecting this child that holds the key to keeping civilization going. And it actually reminded me of that a little bit. It's not as great of a film as Children of Men. Of course, I think that's one of the great sci-fi films of the last, few decades. So the young girl who plays Melanie is played by newcomer Senia Nanua. I might be butchering her name, so I apologize. She's very good. Glenn Close plays the scientist, who is a very ambivalent character. Is she the villain or is she not? And that's what's great about this movie is it's ambiguous. It's not this thing where it's just straight villains. Even Paddy Considine, who plays at first kind of the military guy who you really dislike because he hates these kids and he wants them to go away. You know, you sort of understand his reasoning. It goes on, and then he turns out to be not such a bad guy. Same thing with the Glenn Close character. The only person who's really sort of a pure heart, heroine in the film is Gemma Arterton, who I reviewed a few episodes back with our co-host Brad Wortman in Their Finest, which she's very good and very good British actress. So yeah, I enjoyed this thoroughly.
Good. 4? I give it 4 stars.
You're giving it
Hands
4?
down,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You just loved it, huh?
Well, for me, I didn't know anything. I knew nothing about it. And so I always say just go in there. I mean, even the little bits that we've kind of talked about here, just forget what you've heard and just watch the movie. Because what I liked about this, and I didn't mention also with Man of the West too, is if both of these films are made today in Hollywood, the first thing they would do is during the credits or before the credits, they would have this big exposition saying, this is what happened and this is why we're here. And I get so tired of that. When we were actually watching Man of the West, we're kind of learning about his character. Is he really doing that because he has this past and we don't really know, and it kind of goes along. This movie, we've got children, in these rooms, and you're just like, what's going on? And I'm sitting there and I'm watching with somebody, with Daniel, and I'm like, what's going on here? What's going on here? And then, the little touches that they have, the new things that they bring to this genre in terms of the holding still. which is terrifying, and also the sense of smell. And there's a
Right.
coding that you can do, and at one point in time, someone wipes something off, and then there's a reaction that is horrific, and it is so incredibly scary. And again, you still don't know exactly what is going on, which I love, because they're not just giving you everything, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, you know, I can easily just go, oh, they're explaining everything, sure. But this one, you really are on the edge of your seat, and then you don't know who's good, you don't know who's bad. You kind of understand, you know, you understand where both of them are coming from and what they're kind of doing. And then there's even more. Gosh, I forgot about the big. I don't want to talk too much about the plant life and what's happening there, which is really interesting. I mean, there are so many things where it's just, you would think this genre would be just completely wore out. We've seen everything, and this really hasn't.
No,
It
has
builds
a
on
lot
it.
of it has a lot of new twists on the zombie genre, like you said, that I hadn't seen before. Kind of bringing in sort of the disease genre and the post-apocalyptic thing, but also some fresh takes. And ending was quite surprising. So you know, it's ambiguous, and I'm not sure what to make of it. But yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. It's really, and to see Glenn Close on the big screen again was another one that I was super excited about.
It was really cool.
She's
She
mostly in
always
TV
wanted to be
these
in
days.
this part of genre, this type of genre, and so she accepted.
Is that
it,
why
brought her
she?
sister
Yeah.
along, and yeah, it
Yeah.
was pretty cool.
And do you know anything about the director? I forgot to
You
look
know,
him up.
he
to
did
see.
a lot of TV shows, but one of them was Sherlock, and we all know that's pretty much like a movie. So, you know, he does have some experience
Okay,
there.
so mostly British stuff.
Yeah, so, you know, I kind of compared like maybe 30 Days Later, because it's not really a type,
Yeah,
that
30
type of
days,
genre.
yeah, or
It's
28
not
days
really-
later.
Or 28, excuse me,
that's
20
the
days
one I
later.
was actually
yeah,
thinking
so yeah,
of,
I was
yeah.
thinking 30 Days of Night. Oh, too many movies in my head. But yeah, it was a little bit like that, and so you don't really kind of know what's going on, and you're just kind of following along with people that are like, what's happening?
Well, and at the
I love
beginning,
that.
I didn't even understand that it was a zombie movie because for quite a while.
Say the Z word. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, you just have no idea, you know, but it was intriguing. It wasn't like no idea because I'm confused. It was no idea, and I'm intrigued. Where is this going? So,
It's such a
and
cool
good
movie.
characters, very
Yeah.
good. Okay,
It's a great find.
so to wrap up, Wonder Woman, I think neither of us can recommend. You're giving 2.5. I'm giving 2 stars. And Quiet Passion for the true feminists out there. No, I'm not going to say that. It's fine if you liked Wonder Woman. You're just wrong. But Quiet Passion, which is a great film in my opinion, 4 stars. Brian liked it, but didn't love it. 3
But
stars.
Cynthia Nixon is 4 stars all the way across. Holy crap.
She's 4 stars in movies, 3
Amazing.
stars according to My Little Chickadee. We both recommend. It's like 3 stars movie. Man of the West, classic, must find it. And The Girl with All the Gifts, we both highly recommend. As always, you can find us on our website at realfilmsnobs.com. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can listen to us on KMUZ Radio, and you can now watch us on YouTube. As always, I'd like to thank our wonderful crew, our fantastic sponsors. Have a great day and great movies.